Comfort hours. I was counting nickels into the till when the moon came up wrong. We get a certain quiet at the stop and go after 9. The highway slipping into a breathing that matches the soda fountain. Soft, a little sticky. I was on my porch at the back of the cinder block building, with my keyring and a styrofoam cup of coffee, watching the east, the way you do when you've got another 8 hours to look at the same walls, and you need something not fluorescent. The air had thinned after a day that ran corn yellow and mean. A dog barked twice at the trailer park behind our dumpster and then thought better of it. The horizon does this trick some nights where it throws you a show. The moon shouldered up neat, a crescent like a clipped fingernail, gold from dust. It slid through a lace of cloud I could have sworn was only a smudge, and the last piece came off like you peel tape and don't tear the paint. Clean. Then it smiled. Not a little, big. The dark places rearranged, the seas and long flats turning into teeth the shape of gravel, the ragged kind you get in freezers when no one defrosts. I don't think I breathed. The grin widened as the moon climbed, like the angle was helping some joke along. The light went wrong with it, not silver, a red like someone had opened a meat locker and the compressor had given up. My coffee went to copper in my mouth. Something in my chest sat up straight like a kid in the back of church getting his name called. The beer truck on the highway downshifted, and every bottle in the cooler behind me answered it. A little clink, like a room of people deciding not to laugh. This is nothing, I told the nothing. It's dust and my eyes. The coffee steamed a thread in the cool, and the thread laid down flat, like it had someplace else to be. Back inside the store, the lights tried to talk me down in their way. Steady buzz. Shine on tile you only get with mops that smell like lemon. No lemon ever agreed to be. The receipt printer blinked its little green. The lottery machine slept with its eyelid blue. The roller grill made a slow squeak as it turned 3 lonely hot dogs into religion. I watched the glass door. You watch for shape at night. A shoulder you know. A hat you don't want to. The flat profile of a kid who needs you to say the word for him to stop. The stop and go open. 24-hour sticker ghosted my reflection at the bottom. My face didn't look like my face in the glass. Paler, thinner, like the moon wanted to dress me for a joke too. The first customer after the smile was Mornin' Earl, who runs the passing lane like it owes him back wages. He came in with his chin down and his eyes at war with the fluorescent. "Pump 2 froze again," he said. His voice always sounds like he just finished cussing someone out, and now the check needs to be signed. "It quits when it's mad," I said, reaching for the reset. "Same as me." "See that thing?" he said, jerking his thumb up like he was hitching his own neck. "I saw a lot of things," I said, "because I'm not in the business of providing experience to men who need your witness like oxygen." "Looks like a mouth," he said, and he did not say it the way you say jokes. He stared past me into the cooler doors. The long LED bars in there hummed their skinny hum. "Don't like red light," he said lower. "Don't look at it," I said. He laughed but didn't get any taller. Bought chew, bought gas, bought a scratch-off he patted twice like he'd trained it to behave. The lottery reader chirped when I scanned it, the polite little beep it always makes. Tonight it sounded tonguey. When he went back out, the bell on the door had the same dry sound it has had since someone hung it in 1996. Twice, ding-dong, like we are a house where someone still calls at dinner. I watched the parking lot light make its circle on the asphalt, bugs in it doing their last work for the evening. Earl's taillights went onto the highway and turned into 2 nervous cherries. The radio on the counter did not play music. We are subject to corporate about that, the same 6 songs after midnight until your head is a jukebox that took a bad bet. Tonight it was the No AA band, a steady man reading about humidity and winds and then slipping into a special advisory with no warning. "Atmospheric optics event," he said, which is a way of calling ghosts weather. "Residents should minimize outdoor exposure between dusk and dawn until further notice." He did not say the moon. He did not say smile. He said, "There is no identified risk to infrastructure." I blew air out through my nose and put the sign we were supposed to put, "Please limit loitering, company policy." There's nothing like asking people to leave a place they have no other reason to be. Between 1 and 2, a young couple came in soft like thieves. She with her hair up in a knot that looked like it could hold a pencil forever, he with grease on his trade school shirt and a mouth too busy to rest. They bought chips, bought 2 tall boys, and said not one thing about the sky. People can make a whole life and not step in the deep. After they left, I turned the coffee burner off because the smell had leaned towards scorched. The heater plate clicked as it cooled, a little metal tskatsk like it was disappointed in me. I wiped the counter with a cloth that was white when I started at 8 and would be brown by 3. The receipt printer threw the little strip it throws when it thinks you need a test, even though I had not asked for one. On the paper, the black said, "Ready, ready." But between the 2nd and the 3rd, ready came a line that wasn't the way the roll prints, faint, diagonal, like a ghost in the thermal, open with E. I tore it off and looked at it in the way you look at a problem if you think you can act like it is not one. The printer's green light did not blink. I tossed the strip in the trash with the coffee filter and told myself the roll was cheap and sometimes heat ghosts ink from the layer underneath. If you stack tests and the bottom one bleeds, you get words that are not yours. Around 2:30, a patrol car coasted in. Deputy Sumter, square head, good at silence, came in and stood a minute under the vent, because the AC vent comes down with the only honest air in the county. He bought nothing. He leaned on the counter with his knuckles and stared at the wall behind my head, where we keep the cigarettes in their crazy quilt. "You all right?" he said, like the words were code he had to say on rounds. "I'm inside," I said. He flared his nostrils the way he does when he smells nonsense. "Dispatch says keep it open. People get nervous when lights go dark." "I am people," I said. He looked down at the lottery machine and then out the door, and then at his own hands. He has a wedding ring that cuts a groove in the skin, even when he takes it off. "You see anything?" he said. He didn't finish. He looked up and down me like I was a door that hadn't decided. "Lock the back." His reflection in the cooler glass had red along it, where the moon colored the night in streaks. He left, and the bell did the sigh. In the parking lot, his radio threw a long hiss, then a woman's voice saying units were to avoid, non-essential stops. I wanted to laugh at that. No stop after 2 is essential. That is why they're after 2. Between 3 and 4, the road went empty as a bowl. Sometimes I get this good hour sleep doesn't know how to fight. Start the mop bucket squeal on tile, roll the wet line down an aisle, watch the dirt spread out like a map of the day. Tonight the mop felt heavier. The bucket's handle shocked me with a little static when I shook the wringer. For a second, a pale arc jumped from my knuckle to the metal mouth. The red of the moon made the shadow go strange on the floor, longer than the thing deserves to be. I checked the deli case like that would steady the day. The ham had that over pink that never belonged to an animal. The cheese sweated in 2 colors. The cooler fans ticked and then ran clear like a man clearing his throat. When I slid the glass to wipe it, the condensation made my finger tracks clean. I could see in the smeared glass a reflection of the moon in the windshield of Earl's truck, 2 pumps over. I hadn't seen him come back. I hadn't heard. The grin rode the curve of his windshield, wider than the cab, teeth made out of pitted glass. I went to the door and held my hand on the bar, and then took it off. I stood until the truck decided to be empty and left without him. After 4, a semi eased in, and the driver sat there with his hands on 10 and 2, and his head bowed like a man at prayer or a nap. He never came in. He sat until the sky took on that weak eggshell at its edges, and the grin lost an inch to the light. Then he pulled onto the highway, slow, careful, like he did not want to disturb whatever piece of the world was bent. When dawn decided to be itself, the moon put on her best face again, respectable. The red went away like embarrassment. I went out to dump the trash, and the air smelled like wet pennies. Down by the culvert behind the store, something scraped, and I thought raccoon until I saw the pile of earth by the concrete mouth, like something had dragged a tongue there and gathered dirt. The weeds leaned away from it in a way weeds don't do unless people coax them. At 7, Delia came in to run the morning shift. She brings a bag of carrots and an old radio show she plays on her phone like it's medicine. She looked at my face and then at the sky like she could do math. "You look thin," she said. She has learned how to say every insult like she's complimenting your hat. "You look kind," I said, because I had not earned thin. I had earned awake. "You hear the advisory," she said, even though my ears were full with it. "My neighbor says it's pollution from the plant. She always says that. Plant could be closed 20 years, and she'd still blame the smokestack she remembers in her bones." "You see the moon," I said. "I go to bed at 9, she said, proud, and then softer. "I saw a picture. My niece put it on her stories. Filters do things. We did inventory because inventory does not care what you think about the moon. I counted cigarettes by the carton and then by the single because somebody buys them one at a time like they think that makes it a plan. When I counted the cigars, the scanner wanted to make jokes. The UPC on the grape ones, which are a crime to begin with, threw not numbers but letters. Hungry. I beeped it again. The machine saved me from my own brain. 6/1/3003. I told myself the walker had lodged a crumb and the laser did its best. If you give a man a reason with tools in it, he'll marry it. By 9, the county sent a push. Avoid looking directly at the moon. Stay indoors after sunset. Check on vulnerable neighbors. It came with a little breathing icon, a pair of lungs the color of warnings. The boss texted, "No closures. Head office says hours normal. Keep fronts lit." He added a thumbs up, like the thumb belonged to an actual hand and not a little machine. I held my own thumb up to my own eye and thought mine looked too human to be useful. I slept that afternoon like you put a towel over a bird cage. The room stayed too warm by a degree. The fan made a little pebbly tremor because a blade is bent. The neighbor's lawn service did their vow to keep grass in a relationship with embarrassment. I woke twice with a start like a dropped pot and found my hand up at my mouth as if I had been trying to hold it shut from the inside. Right before I went in for the night again, my sister called. "You hear what the county's saying?" she said. This was an upgrade from her usual, which is to tell me what the county is doing wrong. "I heard," I said. "I hear everything. It's my job." She breathed, and I heard the tap of her nail on her kitchen counter. She is the sort of person who knows her nails better than her husband. "You can ask for hazard pay if they make you work in an advisory," she said. "I asked for a chair once," I said. "They said the camera angle would make me look idle." "That moon looks like a mouth," she said, a whisper like the phone line might tell on us. "Don't look at it," I said. "I'm serious," she said. "I am too," I said, and then we each let the other off the hook by talking about the little things. Her boy got a B. My truck had a light on that meant nothing new. I told her I'd stop by if I didn't need to sleep through my life. Back at the stop and go, the light over the pumps had grown a rattle like a loose screw in a jar. Fast, metal. I set the ladder and tightened the housing, and the rattling stopped, and then it didn't. The moon came up on schedule. The grin waited at the edge like a show-off. When it cleared the billboard for the casino, it had its mouth open wide enough you could have driven a truck into it. A high school kid came in with earbuds and bought a soda and moved like a person who had decided to treat fate polite, as long as it stayed on the other side of a counter. A woman bought bleach and told me not to judge, as if I would judge bleach on a night like this. Around 11, a man I had never seen came in with a paper mask on and bought milk and stood too long staring at the rows of cereal like they held a code. When I said, "You all right?" he looked at me with water on his face and said, "I don't know what color anything is anymore." Near midnight, a siren ran down the highway fast and flat. The deputy didn't come. The receipt printer threw half a yard after I hit credit, and the bottom of it was faint diagonal again. The words made me want to put my thumbs in my ears. Open now. The lottery machine spit unprovoked like it had allergies. I turned the radio to the ball game and found only hiss stitched with the Noah voice, saying phrases that felt like someone reading post-its. Stay away from reflections. Limit glass exposure. Close curtains. Containment is a community effort. I went with tape and brown butcher paper to the pane by the ice chest and covered my face in the reflection while I covered the glass. You know what's funny? I could find the roll of tape blind because it lives under the counter by the steel wool, but I could not make my hand stop shaking to tear a neat strip. When I pressed the paper down, the moon through the uncovered part bent the paper S-shadow into a curve that did not match any of the edges. It looked like light had teeth. At something, the chime on the door dinged and no one came through. The little brown rug lifted a hair like someone had stepped almost on it and decided against. The bell on the counter, the one I ring when I go to the restroom and a customer comes in anyway, gave a tiny, honest sound like a glass tasting note. I looked at the mirror over the beer case because there is no place more honest than a cheap mirror at midnight. My own face was there, and behind me in the convex, the moon S grin found the metal edge and rode it like it had lived there for years. I said out loud, no, and it did nothing with my word. Sometime after 2, I got the shakes. Not from caffeine. My coffee sat like a threat, cold now, and I would not drink it. This was the kind of shakes you get when your blood decides to use you as weather. I went to the back and leaned both hands in the mop sink and ran water and splashed my face the way boys do in movies where their day goes wrong. The water came out cloudy for a second, like it didn't like the dark. When I shut it off, the last drop hung too long from the faucet, and in the hanging, the moon's grin sat like a thing kept small for politeness. The cooler fans clicked. The roller grill squeaked. The microwave told me with a single soft beep that it was done with a burrito I had not put in. The lottery machine ejected a ticket with no numbers and a coupon that read simply, "Redeem." I went to the door and stared at the parking lot because a man has a right to know the place from which he will run. The puddle by the dumpster that always lives there after rain was black with the moon in it, the red of it making the oil rings look like eyes that had been punched. A moth rattled the glass by my ear because moths tell you when to move the light. I stood with my hand on the bar and tried to remember if our insurance considered moon an act of God. When my palm left the bar, it made a squeak, and in the squeak, I heard suction. At 3, I heard a laugh, not from a person, from the cooler. It was just the coil switching over. I know that. I am the one who orders the parts. But it sounded like a laugh. It sounded like ice pretending to be a mouth. Down at the culvert, the heap had grown. I went with the trash again, because that is a thing I can do. The smell at the mouth of it had a sweetness like something beginning to rot, and a metallic cold that made my nose remember winter. The weeds had layered down and stayed. The dirt made a little berm like a lip. I looked into the dark and it looked back because everything does when there is a moon. I shook the bags and something inside one thumped like an old melon. I set it gently on the pavement because I'm not a brave man, just a consistent one. On the 3rd night, the advisory got louder. The county posted a number. The city put cones on the road past our turn-in, which meant more people made last-second jerks to get gas and cigarettes and say, "You seeing it?" with eyes not on me, but on the idea. The boss sent a new sign to print, "Comfort Hours. Come inside for a chat." He is a person who believes anxiety has a wallet. A woman my age came in with a baby on her hip, and the baby looked at me the way babies look at ceiling fans. The woman asked if I had blackout paper. I said no. She said, "My grandmother says to cover the mirrors in the house if someone dies." I said I was sorry for her loss, because that is what you say to sentences like that. She laughed once without the baby moving. "I didn't mean that," she said. "I meant cover them now." She set a pack of diapers down, and then picked them up, and then set them down again like the counter was a hot plate. "I see things in the glass," she said, and her mouth did a tremble at one corner, like the exertion of not crying made a small earthquake there. "I see my teeth too long. I see me smiling when I'm not. I put towels over everything." He pulled one off and laughed like I was doing a magic trick. I rang the diapers and said, because it is what stores offer, "Would you like your receipt?" "I would not," she said, looking at the little roll like it could bite. The deputy returned this time near midnight. He came in the back way and did not do his declaration at the vent. He went to the cooler and leaned his head against the door, forehead to glass, a thing he would absolutely tell me not to do if I were doing it. He whispered, "Don't look." He meant outside. He meant the moon had swung to a place where the grin was not just visible, but persuasive. He meant the red had bled into our lot. The shadow on the counter took on a depth that made my hand look like someone else's hand when I set it there. "We're putting officers at the bridges," he said, almost conversational. "People are going out there. I don't know, doing what people do when they want to watch a thing become itself." He looked at me with eyes like coins. "If we get a call," he said, and then he didn't say anything else. He picked a chocolate milk and left $1 even though the milk cost $1.29. I took an old shade from the office and set it on the counter lamp so the light felt thick and yellow, like it might remember when electricity was dear and used only for kindness. The fluorescent over the jerky section flickered and then didn't. When it was off for the 4 seconds it was off, the room felt like a body when the heart stutters. In the dark, the beep of the scanner came from somewhere not the scanner, and I could not catch it by staring. Around 2, a man came in a suit, the kind that lives in a garment bag for funerals and interviews. He held a towel folded neat and asked me for tape. I gave him a roll, and he went out to his car and taped the towel over his windshield with a care that would have been beautiful on a different day. He got in and drove into the ditch with his towel on, which is a thing that can happen when you decide to leave 1 cent at home. He sat then with his hands at 10 and 2 and the towel over the glass, and I thought, this is how some people are going to get through it, keeping the world small until the world is something they can handle. Inside, the receipt paper spat another of its little diagonals. I tore it and smoothed it on the counter. It read, "In the faint that thermal does when it tries to keep secrets, open wide." I told myself, again, rolls bleed. I told myself the heat from the housing had impressed a phrase from a layer below and brought it forward. I told myself the words in this place belonged to me and to the UPCs and to old jokes on the dry erase. I went to the shelf of tape again to put the roll back and found an empty spot, 4 deep where there were 5. The space looked like an open mouth. I thought, because my brain is not as loyal as I would prefer, that if I leaned close and put my ear to that open spot, I might hear breathing. I did not. At 3, I tried to eat the burrito the microwave had decided to heat. I took a bite, and the meat in it had no temperature. It tasted like metal and regret. I chewed twice and then didn't. I set it down, and the wrapper stuck to my thumb in a way that made me think of tongues, and I wiped my hand on the towel at my hip like I had been caught touching something private. The culvert talked again. I went out because I am an idiot who believes in causality. If a thing makes noise, it has an origin. The mound by the mouth had crusted over, a skin of dirt drawn tight, cracked in a half circle. The crack looked like a grin. I crouched and my knee made a pop that sounded like a twig in a movie where the animal hears and turns. The smell coming out was cold, chemical, not natural. It smelled like the roller grill and the mop sink and the inside of a freezer all moved to the same room. I stood, careful. I do not kneel too quickly these days. When I did, the shadow of my head on the apron of the concrete didn't sit where my head sits. It lifted up my shadow mouth and smiled, and then went back to being obedient to whatever light was issuing orders. I told the culvert, "You can keep it," and hauled the bags into the dumpster and went inside and put my hand on the counter. The laminate is chipped where someone once rubbed a ring the nervous way. I fitted my ring finger in the groove, and my hand went still. Dawn came like a reprieve on the third day. The grin lost definition. The red went from the world. A hummingbird came to the ragweed by the back door because hummingbirds do not read advisories. I drove home down the bypass, and the old mill where we used to make things stood with its roofline like broken teeth, and I laughed once alone, and then made myself stop because laughing by yourself in a truck has a half-life. I slept and dreamed. I avoid mentioning my dreams to anyone except when they are almost jokes. This one had no punchline. I was on the porch of the stop and go, but the porch was the porch of my old house, and my father was out in the yard with his back turned staring at the highway like it just happened to him, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to claim it. The moon hung over the dairy juice billboard with its grin, and my father turned and smiled at me in a way that said, "Don't to be afraid like men lie to their sons when fear has a use and they wish it didn't tea." His teeth were too many by two. The phone buzzed me awake before the dream could get sentimental. The boss, a 3-word text, "Do not close." I turned the phone face down like that would make his mouth shut. That night started like the others and then found another gear. The red came earlier, bled in before the sun even made its excuses. The county siren did its test at 8 and then did it again at 9, like someone's finger couldn't resist the button. Sumter parked across the street in the old church lot and sat with his lights off. Once an hour I saw the glow of his phone lift his face from the dark, and in the glass I could almost see him. A woman came in with a dog tucked into her coat, both of them the picture of needing the space to get smaller. She bought water, then remembered the advisory and changed to soda. The dog looked up at the ceiling and made a noise like a door trying its latch. I gave the dog a jerky, and she gave me a look that said, "If this goes on, we will owe each other more than 10 inches of counter and paper currency." I taped more paper to more glass. The store went from bright to close. The lights felt heavier in the air, like someone sank them a foot. The scanner misread again and then behaved. The lottery machine spit and I unplugged it, because I'm allowed 1 victory per shift. The receipt printer blinked and I pulled its roll and set it aside. When I set the new roll in, the cardboard core of the old one had a perfect round hole, and around that hole the dust of paper like powder. And for a second, looking down, I had the dizzy thought that the hole was in the world and everything was arranged respectfully around it to honor the emptiness. The noise from the culvert climbed a note. It was not scraping anymore. It was a gelding laugh through its nose. The dumpster lid had a cluck to it when the wind took it. A sedan pulled in wrong and the driver sat with her hands on the wheel and her mouth a long white line, and the red light from the moon made her face look unfinished. She never got out. I watched until watching did nothing, and I went back to mop the spill by the drinks aisle that always appears when you need one more task between you and the next thing. At 2:15, the lights dipped and came back. The hum of the freezers stayed steady because those circuits are built to ride. The camera over the register clicked as the UPS under it did its little life support job. My screen went black and then woke sluggish. For a second, the feed from the parking lot camera showed not my lot, but a piece of road that was not a road. We have 2 lanes with trees that hang down across and a white line painted cheap. The picture had a tilt, like the camera was held by a man who hadn't used one before. In the middle of that wrong road, the moon's grin sat in a puddle. It stretched like a cat and touched both curbs. I put my palm flat to the screen like I could change the channel by warming it. The picture fled like a shy child. The lot returned. The red and the grin did not. At 3, the buzz became a pressure. I took down the sign that says no public restroom and walked back and set my hands on the sink rim again. The face in the mirror above it was not entirely mine. It had too much smile at the corners, like somebody had pulled 2 strings top to bottom. I turned my head, and it did too, but for an instant between turns, it kept smiling the way the picture of a person smiles when they want your money. I opened the paper towel cabinet and the towels were damp. Paper doesn't like damp. When I wiped my face, the towel stuck and then tore. I basted the mirror with another towel until only my outline was there. I told the mirror because I grew up in a house where my mother spoke to objects like they were on staff. "You're excused." Out by the culvert, the mound had altered its shape to a broad oval. Something had pressed it from inside to smooth, like the way we used to make ice cream meeples in the sandbox with the scoop, turning the wet sand until the walls remembered what shape they were supposed to be. "Okay," I said to the air. "We're at the part where I am not helpful." The cold out of the dark hit my teeth in a way I feel looked like grief. I will tell this part plain, because anything else will make it look like I'm trying to sell what I saw. A child came up the slope of the culvert on hands and knees, quiet as cats are when cats mean it. He wore a t-shirt with a cartoon, in a style that went out before I came of working age. He had no shoes. His hands and feet had a residue, not mud, not the dark you get pulling a fish from a river, a kind of fine dust like what lives inside walls. He lifted his head, and the red from the moon touched his mouth, and his mouth opened a little like he was going to ask me a question, and then remembered he was not supposed to speak to strangers. I did not go to him. The rules for nights like this are to keep the counter between you and whatever asks you to step around it. I left the bags by the dumpster and went into my store and set both locks and then the chain we are not supposed to use because it looks unfriendly. I stood with my hands flat on the counter and felt the laminate soft with use under my palms. The boy did not come to the door. He stood by the culvert looking at the highway, like the highway had promised to give him something and had changed its mind. He was gone in a blink that did not involve his moving. One frame of night contained him, the next did not. I played the cameras back and saw him not on them. The culvert mound in black and white looked like a normal piece of dirt seen by a camera working too hard. At 4, sometime when the hour goes toward what truckers call beer o'clock, the red started to thin. The grin turned into a tired line. The air gained its temperature back from the inside out. The mop water did not have that copper taste anymore when I leaned too close. I thought and felt ashamed for the thought that we might be past the worst of it. The no AA voice on the radio tried new phrases out loud. Deterioration of atmospheric particulate. Visual feedback anomaly. Mitigating. Resume near normal activities with caution. A joyless little clapping went on in my chest. The advisory on my phone dropped its push to a smaller red dot. I stood on the porch at the back again with my coffee and watched the line of the sky correct itself. The dairy juice billboard looked like a promise you could maybe believe for a morning. Delia would be there at 7 with her carrots and her stories. I could go home and sleep the way people sleep in months when their roofs hold. The grin had gone back to its regular places. Inside, the receipt printer woke and spat a length of paper. The new roll smell came off it, clean and a little chemical. I tore it. It read, "Total, $0 change, Drew, thank you." And then at the bottom, very faint, almost a whisper of heat in the paper, "See you." I checked the roll below it. No bleed? It felt like the thing you get in your throat when you laugh at a funeral and convert it into a cough. When Delia came, I was washing the same patch of counter I had washed twice already. She set her carrots down and put her hand on my shoulder in her work way, not unkind, not intimate, just a hand to make sure the thing she needed to turn had the handle it wanted. "It's breaking," she said, nodding toward the slice of window not taped. My neighbor says it's just dust from fires. Last year you couldn't see the water tower for a week, remember? I remember my aunt, I said, and then wanted to unsay it because I had brought an old woman into our mourning like a bad penny. Delia gave me a look the way people do when you hand them a fragile they hadn't asked to hold. She went to the register and counted the till, and the nickels behaved. I drove by the river, watched water forget, and then remember to be itself, brown with a silver talk near the rocks. The old men with white hats had come back like birds to the rail, where they lean and talk nonsense at the water. One of them had a little bell on his tackle, and when it rang it sounded like a real bell. Not the sound of the cooler coil tricking me, not the sound of paper making words it didn't know, not the memory of a laugh in a pipe. The bell said a fish had found a hook, and that was what the day wanted to be about. I slept like work. And then, because the stories people tell themselves should have the dignity to end, the nights did not end. They thinned, yes, they hides their grin. They took on an innocence you might want to believe. The advisory went to yellow. The county stopped telling us what to do, as if their lack of instructions made the thing itself less real. People came out and spared themselves by putting sunglasses on in the dark and saying, "Look, it's pretty, like every dangerous thing the world uses to get into you comes in through charm." The fourth night I wore my jacket with the chain-stitched name on it because the air had that early fall knife. The ball game was back, and the announcer kept saying things like how the sky was the color of a bruise over left field, and how it would be good to put 4 across now and not have to think about it late. The clerks from the motel across the street came in for cigarettes and called me by my name without my name being pinned to me, and this, I cannot explain why, made me feel like a normal man. At one, the culvert laughed again, not loud, a sound like someone telling a joke under their breath to a person who only got the first half of it. I went to the back door, and I made myself not go out, and I watched through the slit between the door and the jamb. The mound rose and fell like someone underneath needed to remember how a chest works. When it went still, my own chest went against it a beat too long, and I had to cough to trick myself back into a tempo. Inside, a shadow moved across the ceiling, and I told myself it was a moth because moths have rights in stores like mine. It skated along the grid where the tiles sit, and when it get to the fluorescent, it hesitated like a person about to step off a curb they can't see. The light did not flicker. The shadow did anyway. At 3, a man in a hoodie stood by the door and did not come in. He moved his head in a small way, and it took me a full half-minute to realize he was smiling. He was smiling so hard, his face had the wrong muscles for it. I looked away because we both needed me to. On the 5th night, I did nothing extraordinary. I came to work on time. I stocked the single-serving cereal with the bright pictures like saints. I mopped, I wiped, I reheated burrito. I told a kid to keep his skateboard outside and kept my voice flat so he would not do the kind of flip boys do with words when they think they have caught you out. I did not go to the culvert. I did not look at the moon except in the reflection of the coffee urn when I pumped myself the small mercy of warmth. The printer behaved. The scanner beeped numbers in numbers. The lottery machine slept a righteous sleep. The door chime did its door chime. The sign about loitering leaned in its lean. This is what I would like to say, that living like that made the thing go away, that we starved it with our boring. Here is what I will say. At 4, when Harlan from the freezer warehouse 2 miles down came in for cigarettes and made the joke he always makes about how a man can be blamed for bad choices. At 4, he put his money on the counter and his hand looked wrong. Not hurt, not swollen. His thumb had 4 creases instead of 3. I counted them. I count things when the world gets past a point. I blinked, and it had 3 again. He lit in the doorway with his cupped palm, and the tobacco smoke ran straight into that red light from the moon that is not supposed to be there, and the red made the smoke look like a thing bleeding up. I did not scare Harlan with my observations. I sold him what he wanted and told him to have a night that did not require me. I went to the mop sink and put my face over it and breathed the smell of cheap lemon and hot pipe and ancient copper and told the room I have limits. The room made a sound in answer like a man taking off boots. The mirror, still covered by my towel, sighed a little, as if it had been asked just one more time to pretend. I lasted all the way to dawn. The next afternoon, my sister sent a picture of the sky from her backyard and wrote under it, "Pretty," and I wrote back, "Don't," and she wrote an eye roll and a laughing face like we are children, which maybe we are when it comes to the sky. She said she'd bring me a casserole because she had made two. I told her not to come by after dark, and she told me not to tell her what to do, and I said only if she promised to be predictable in other ways. She did not answer, which is one way to promise. On the 6th night, the advisory returned to orange, and the sirens did a loop, and the radio man said a phrase you don't want to hear from someone on the radio, out of an abundance of caution. The boss texted at 9, "Closed doors, look weak. Open looks strong. Be that." I wrote nothing back because there is no emoji for what I felt. The culvert did not laugh this night. It breathed. It breathed with me. It breathed faster when I did. Men tell you that when you fish, sometimes you feel the line sing through your fingers. You and the thing on the other end are in the same little river of pull, and it makes you ashamed of your hands. I do not fish. But I stood 10 feet from the mouth of that culvert and felt the air on my teeth answer the air inside the pipe, and I thought, this is how we feed it. There is a button under the counter that calls the police. It is covered with a plastic box, so no one hits it with a soda and sends men with guns to my register. I put my finger under that plastic, and I left it there, and I did not press. Sumter sat across the street again, with his lights off and his phone lighting his face, and if I had pressed the button he would have come, and then we would have been two men holding a problem between us like a paper bag with something alive in it. At 1:30, a small, thin woman came in and took off her sunglasses and put them on the counter. Her left eye was not right. It did not look at me. It did not look at anything. It looked at the bell hanging from the top shelf that I use to get my own attention when I need to go back for cigarettes. "Can I sit?" she said. And I said, "We cannot promote loitering," and she looked at me like I had told her the hours for happiness had been updated. I swung the chair behind the counter around, and she sat, because once upon a time my mother raised a boy who would move a chair. She did not speak for a minute. She listened to my store. She listened to the machines the way you listen to a neighbor through the wall. "It's better in here," she said. "My apartment sounds like laughing." "You can call your landlord," I said, because there is a script. "It is not the kind of laughing that stops because of a call," she said. She put her sunglasses back on. "I'm going to get a soda," she said, and stood, deliberate, like a person recovering from an injury, and walked the aisle with her hand on the shelves, like she was training herself to balance. She took a grape soda because that is the kind I cannot catch in myself as a grown man, and I loved her for the choice. I did not let her pay. At 3 in the morning on the 7th night, which is Sunday if you count like a clerk, and the 7th if you count like a person who has been told to announce days to himself to keep from slipping, the moon opened her mouth wider than a picture. The red went into the room, like you open a door to heat. The paper I had taped to the windows softened and sagged. The scanner scanned one long, flat tone, like a hospital. The cooler coil made a laugh that was not a laugh, or I will not call it a laugh anymore. The receipt printer threw paper across the counter, and the thermal asked me in its half-invisible, "Open, open, open." I put my hand on the counter. I put my other hand on the counter. I closed my eyes. The bell on the counter rang without anyone touching it. A quiet, single note that told polite people another person had already been helped. The door swung open. I had not unlocked it. No one came in. The rug lifted and set. The air came in and went out. My eyes were closed and I saw red anyway because that light goes through lids. I opened them when I heard the voice, a little boy, not the culvert boy, a different mouth, a different hometown. "Do you have water?" he said. and he was standing in front of me like a person sent by someone who raises children to demand nothing. "In the cooler," I said, too loud. He shook his head slow. "Not that kind," he said. "I don't think that kind comes in plastic," I said, and he thought that was funny and smiled, and I saw the mistake in his mouth. He had one too many teeth in the front, or not enough gum, or the moon had done something with my sense another way, and I am smearing a boyish face with the night like a bad painter. "I can't sell you a thing if you don't point to it," I said, because men who are scared become apprentices to policy. He nodded like he'd appreciate a receipt and turned and walked out into the red. He did not go to the culvert. He did not go to the pumps. He walked to the highway and stood there at the white line staring at the mouth of the world like it had called him by name. I went to the door and I did a thing on a night I do not think I had the right to do. I locked it. That boy turned his head when he heard the metal fall into place, and he smiled again, a smile that belonged to me in some other town when I had all my teeth still coming. And I put my forehead to the glass and I said, "We're closed." And he laughed at me, and I laughed, and the world did not crack, but it learned how. I stayed until Delia came with the carrots and the radio, and we exchanged the nod of people who have seen someone else naked. I drove home in the grey, unmoon light, and when I got to my door, my sister was sitting on the steps with a casserole in a pan and her hands in her pockets, and her eyes mad like somebody S-man had not come home when he said he would. "You look sick," she said. "Not yet," I said. "You smell like pennies," she said. "You brought me something that will fix that," I said, and she made a face that said I had used up my ration of jokes. "Don't look at the sky," she said. "I look at shelves," I said. She stood, and the casserole made the sound casseroles make when they are brought to men who done to cook for themselves, salt and obligation. "Eat this now or later," she said. "I'm going to my place. I'll call you. If you do not answer, I am going to walk over, and if you are dead, I am going to bring you back to yell at you." I said I loved her, because that is the point of this chapter in our story, and she rolled her eyes like she was 16, and then hugged me like she was 40, and then went. "The moon at noon looks like daytime has won an argument. Don't let noon fool you. The grin is there, just not at an angle owned by men. The mouth waits. The receipt printer waits. The culvert waits. The county will send no more advisories because advice has a number of days. It can be new before the day wants it not to be told anything. The boss will say be open because to him, open is not a door but a religion. The deputy will park across and will drink a milk he pays for wrong and leave the extra because this is the way he shows me he knows how the world can be right if you cover the worst of it with small, respectful acts. At the stop and go, the fridge hums, the fans click, the fluorescent buzz, the mop squeals and then sings. Barcode beeps count the living and the nearly. I count nickels and keep a till. The bell dings, polite as manners. The night goes on. I do not go to the culvert every night. I go enough to keep us honest, enough to mark that we are not yet eaten, though there are bites we will never get back. I have not found the boy again. Sometimes in the red that came to be our weather, I see a small shape run along the edge of the light, the way you move when you are learning your town, new shoes, old rules. Sometimes something laughs in the coils, and I tell myself it is only how cold changes metal. Sometimes the lottery machine prints me a long empty ticket, and I ball it and throw it and say, "Not tonight." And the paper, which is only ever loyal to the last heat that touched it, curls soft as a tongue. I sleep. I wake. My mouth is not my mouth sometimes in the mirror. I put a towel over it and turn the lights to low and count the nickels. When I stand on the back stoop with a cup of coffee, I have stopped pouring. The moon climbs her old ramp and finds the part of the sky that belongs to chalk and to old men and to prayers. She smiles. She means it. I turn my head. The door at my back is open to a place with refrigerators and light and paper and prices. The highway is a mouth. The mouth is a highway. Between them is my porch and my coffee cooling and my two hands that look like any man's hands, if you catch them before he does something and ruin them forever. If this story lands with you, please like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who enjoys quiet, literary horror. Comments are open. Tell me your favorite image or line.